Sansa. Sansa Stark is one of the most underrated characters in A Song of Ice and Fire, even though her transformation is one of the most well-done and compelling arcs of the entire series. Although Sansa begins the story as a naive young girl who is swept up in the fantasies of chivalry and romance, her story takes a turn when her father is killed and she is thrown into the brutal reality of Westerosi politics. Whereas she was expecting a happy ever after when she arrived in Westeros, Sansa instead ends up as a prisoner who is used and abused by her cruel captors.
Leave her face. I like her pretty.
Sansa endures many acts of cruelty under the imprisonment of the Lannisters, but what I love about her character is that this never breaks her. In fact, instead of breaking, Sansa learns.
I'm a slow learner. It's true. But I learn.
She adapts to the game instead of just succumbing to it. So much so that by the time of the Winds of Winter, she will no longer be a pawn being moved by other players. She will be a player herself, quietly mastering the game that once controlled her. Many book fans misunderstand Sansa's role in the narrative, dismissing her as a boring, naive, or even irrelevant character. However, I actually think that Sansa is one of George R. R. Martin's most masterfully crafted characters, the key to understanding the political world of the story, as well as how to navigate its intricacies and complexities. Unlike most of the other POV characters in the narrative, Sansa is directly impacted by the politicking that occurs in the Red Keep, and the fact that she learns how to play the game gradually actually mirrors the audience's own evolving as we begin to understand Westerosi politics. Just like us, she starts the story as being naive and clueless about the complexities of the politics in the Red Keep. When she arrives in King's Landing, she knows as much about the city as we do, and Sansa is almost an unreliable narrator, mainly because she refuses to see the reality of her situation. She romanticizes court life, seeing everything through the lens of the songs and stories that she heard growing up. And she even does this with Joffrey, idolizing him and blinding herself to his true nature. There's even a scene in A Game of Thrones where Sansa sees Sir Ilyn and is frightened by him, but Joffrey comes to her and escorts her away from him. The way that Sansa frames the whole thing, though, is what's interesting. She thinks to herself, he was so gallant, the way he had rescued her from Sir Ilyn and the Hound. Why, it was almost like the songs, like the time Serwyn of the Mirror Shield saved the Princess Darissa from the giants. The touch of Joffrey's hand on her sleeve made her heart beat faster. This was simply a kind gesture by Joffrey, which was likely encouraged by his mother, and yet Sansa romanticizes it, describing Joffrey as a rescuer who seems gallant and brave. She literally idolizes and romanticizes him. Later on in the story, when Joffrey is attacked by Arya for trying to cut the butcher's boy, it's Sansa who defends him and protects him, claiming to not really remember what happened that had led to the attack.
I don't know. I don't remember. Everything happened so fast. I didn't see.
In the book, the fact that Sansa idolizes Joffrey and romanticizes her relationship with him is what actually leads to her father's death. In the book, Ned Stark's death is as a direct result of Sansa's actions, because after Ned tells her that they are going to leave King's Landing, Sansa tries to make things right by telling Cersei. In A Game of Thrones, Sansa says, "It was for love. Father wouldn't even give me leave to say farewell. He was going to take me back to Winterfell and marry me to some hedge knight, even though it was Joff I wanted. I told him, but he wouldn't listen." The king had been her last hope. The king could command father to let her stay in King's Landing and marry Prince Joffrey. Sansa knew he could, but the king had always frightened her. So she went to the queen instead and poured out her heart, and Cersei had listened and thanked her sweetly. Only then, Sir Aris had escorted her to the high room in Maegor's holdfast and posted guards, and a few hours later, the fighting had begun outside. Sansa's romanticization of Joffrey is what leads to her father's death in the book, and it's also what leads to her imprisonment in the Red Keep. Her naivete and fantasies lead to her captivity, and this is why so many book fans don't like Book Sansa. So many fans dismiss Sansa as being insufferable and foolish, arguing that her choices repeatedly lead her into more trouble. It's because of these types of decisions that so many readers express disdain for Sansa's character and find her POV chapters to be dull and ponderous. However, it's important to remember that in the books, Sansa is only 12 years old, an impressionable child that's been raised to be courteous and obedient all her life. Her actions, rather than reflecting inherent stupidity, are often a result of her sheltered upbringing and the lessons that she received from people like Septa Mordain. Septa Mordain, for example, is the one that tells her things like, "A lady's armor is her courtesy." But what I love about Sansa's character as the story goes on is that she actually uses these lessons to survive in King's Landing. And in time, she adapts and learns how to maneuver herself through the intricacies of the politicking in the Red Keep. She knows that people perceive her as a courteous and obedient girl, so she slowly begins to use that to try and influence some of their decisions. For example, the way that she tries to goad Joffrey into fighting during the Battle of the Blackwater, masking her intentions with fake flattery and courteousness.
So you'll be outside the gates fighting in the vanguard?
The king doesn't discuss battle plans with stupid girls.
I'm sorry, Your Grace, you're right, I'm stupid. Of course you'll be in the vanguard. They say my brother Rob always goes where the fighting is thickest, and he's only a pretender.
She knows that Joffrey has a fragile ego, so she tries to goad him into fighting in the battle, using his disdain for her brother as bait. Very clever. Throughout A Storm of Swords, Sansa also uses the fact that she loves to pray in the Godswood as a cover for her conspiring to leave the city. The interesting thing is that no one suspects her at all, not even Tyrion. Just like everyone else, he thinks that she's just going to the Godswood to pray. Tyrion thought of his child wife, praying in the Godswood even now, praying to her father's gods to bring her brother victory and keep her mother safe, no doubt. But Tyrion was wrong. Sansa was planning her escape the whole time with Sodontos. The point is, throughout the narrative, Sansa slowly learns to use the way that people perceive her as a strength, pushing her own agendas and achieving her own political ends. When Littlefinger saves her and takes her to the Vale, she further learns how to play the Game of Thrones and think long-term as a politician. He teaches her how to be cunning and deceptive when politicking, as those are the things that will make her more effective in the game.
Always keep your foes confused. If they don't know who you are or what you want, they can't know what you plan to do next.
And Sansa does learn these methods and tactics from Littlefinger, successfully applying them as she takes on the identity of Elaine Stone, Littlefinger's bastard daughter. As Elaine Stone, Sansa deceives the Lords of the Vale, positioning herself to marry Sir Harold Harding, the presumptive heir to the Vale once Sweet Robin dies. In the sample chapters that were released for the Winds of Winter, we see how Sansa uses her beauty and guile to seduce Harry, leading him on so that she can marry him and become the Lady of the Vale. And there he stood, Harry the heir himself, tall, handsome, scowling. "Lady Elaine, may I partner you in this dance?" She considered for a moment. "No, I don't think so." Color rose to his cheeks. "I was unforgivably rude to you in the yard. You must forgive me." "Must?" She tossed her hair, took a sip of wine, made him wait. "How can you forgive someone who is unforgivably rude? Will you explain that to me, sir?" Sir Harold looked confused. Please, one dance. Charm him, entrance him, bewitch him. If you insist. By the end of the night, Sansa succeeds in seducing Harry, and we can see that the plan to marry him might actually work. We can see that by the winds of winter, she will no longer be a pawn in the Game of Thrones, but rather she will be a player with her own political ends. For me, this is what makes Sansa such a compelling POV character. Her journey from being a frightened, naive girl to a savvy politician with real influence and power. Her time with Littlefinger becomes a turning point in her arc, which leads to her being a real player. And there is so much significance to this type of narrative journey. For one, it shows the opposite of what Dan and Dave tried to show with Sansa's character. That feminine traits can be a powerful tool in the Game of Thrones. For the most part, it always seemed like Dan and Dave were trying to purge Sansa of her femininity, presenting it as a weakness that held her back or led her to trouble. There was a sense of this throughout the story, to be honest.
You whine and cry and quit. You sound like a bloody woman.
However, this is not what George R. Martin tries to convey with Sansa's character. In the books, he actually tries to convey the opposite. George shows that Sansa's femininity is actually her strength, and that it is what leads to her survival and growth throughout the narrative of the story. She uses her beauty and intellect to seduce Harry Harding and furthers her own political ambitions of being the Lady of the Vale. Rather than to do so with a sword or being stoic and masculine, like Show Sansa, she embraces her feminine qualities and uses them as her strength. And for me, it's fascinating to see how this might actually work out for Sansa in the future. Already, it has transformed her from being a pawn who was exploited for the purposes of others to a player who could have real power to shape the future events of Westerosi politics. I'm personally excited to see how this will play out in the Winds of Winter. But how about you? What do you think about Sansa's character in the book? Do you find her journey compelling to read about? Let me know down below in the comments section and click the thumbs up button if you liked this video. Also subscribe to the channel for future content and click the notification bell to know when it comes out. Otherwise, thank you for watching the video. Peace.